So, one of the common questions for folks who are thinking about starting a co-working space is the co-working market saturated? And this is an absolutely normal and totally understandable question to ask when you see what some of the larger co-working space chains are doing. WeWork and so many of the other people who are raising money and just expanding like crazy. Co-working is growing so fast. So, is it growing too fast? Is it saturated? Is it going to collapse? Is now a really bad time to start a co-working space? I will tell you that the answer is, in my opinion, in my informed opinion, no, except maybe kind of yes in one way. So let me unpack that a little bit more. First of all, we have to understand the bigger picture about what's going on in the co-working movement and why this is such a big deal right now. And to understand that, we have to kind of trace back to when co-working started, which was in 2005, and when it started to really get popular, which was kind of 2007 to 2008, 9, and 10. That's when it really started to pick up steam. What else was happening during that time? At the same time as co-working was starting to grow, what you'll find is that just behind that was another trend, which is that more and more people were starting to be able to work from anywhere. Laptops and Wi-Fi and mobile work, which we take for granted today as just being totally normal and commonplace, was still kind of a radical thing. Only 2005, 6, 7 it was really something that not a lot of people were doing. But as more and more people were able to work anywhere, more and more people started working from places other than the traditional 9 to 5 office. And so what you've started to see is that people started leaving traditional 9 to 5 Monday to Friday office centralized workspaces, both in corporate and in terms of startups and freelancers. Um, and then uh, they started to work from home. A lot of people started to work from home, and then found that working from home comes with all kinds of issues and started to look for an alternative. And that's where co-working has started to come in. And this is something that maybe started in the early adopter realm with people who run small businesses, people who are freelancing, that kind of thing. But it's now moving into corporate, where larger companies are looking at their portfolio of spaces that they deal with themselves and saying, we're not really in the business of having to deal with space, and yet we're dealing with all this overhead of all these spaces. And we have a workforce that's changing. We have a lot of people that don't need to necessarily work full time in the office. And so what you have is businesses that are sitting on a lot of real estate that's expensive to manage, that doesn't expand or shrink based on their need, that's costing them a lot of money. And so the larger companies are shifting the way that they are approaching managing their workforce away from having this really heavy portfolio of space that costs them a lot, towards being able to say, well, what if we just pay for our employees to have memberships in co-working spaces, and then they can work wherever they want. And that ends up saving them a lot of overhead. So that mega shift happening in the corporate side is one reason why I believe co-working isn't yet saturated, because we're literally talking about a shift from what we're kind of used to thinking of as normal 9 to 5 white collar work, which would happen for a company in one place, consistently, towards this more networked, distributed, as needed kind of a model. And there is so much. This is like all white collar workspaces we know it is being challenged by this, right? It doesn't mean that everybody who works 9 to 5 in an office is going to eventually work in a co-working space, but it means that the way that we think about how the workforce is managed and the way that it's distributed is changing fundamentally in a way that's going to affect a lot of space. And so what you're seeing is a lot of opportunity on the corporate end, and this is where WeWork is going, is where a lot of other companies are going, is specifically concentrating on corporate clients and dealing with that kind of mega shift on that end. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the gig economy, the freelancers, people starting small businesses, people who are now empowered to make money doing whatever it is that they want in any of a number of ways. And those people might be a little bit more budget conscious, but there are many, and they need the support of a community. They need the support of a network around them. If they're not going to work in a traditional 9 to 5 job, then they need to belong to some other kind of an ecosystem that can help them. And this is where coworking can come in. That market, plus the telecommuters and kind of the flex workers, in the U.S. alone is it's about 50 million people if you add up some of the data that's out there. And those are people who could potentially maybe be members of co-working spaces. Now, even if that number is way off, it's still a lot of people. And as of right now, 2018, the number of members of co-working spaces in the U.S. is about 638,000, which is way less than 50 million. So there's a huge, huge, huge delta. And again, even if these numbers are wildly off, we're still talking about millions and millions of people who are potential members of co-working spaces who are not yet members. Now, why are they not yet members? In part, one of the reasons is people just aren't aware of co-working yet. A lot of people are aware of it, but a lot of people aren't. People maybe think they can't afford it, or they actually can't afford it. And in many cases, it's just membership in a co-working space is not cheap. And a lot of the people, especially on that kind of freelancer side, every dollar counts. And so $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 a month is a lot of money for those folks. But I would say that the real issue is the third one, which is value. And if people understand the value of membership in a co-working space, then the issue around money and the issue around kind of awareness and understanding really starts to erode. And this is where I think there's a lot of room left to be explored, especially kind of on the small business and startup and freelance side, is understanding that the value of being a member of a co-working community and an organization really built around a co-working space is so much more than simply having access to a desk. And this is where I think there's a lot of untapped opportunity in terms of being able to access that in a way that's about something other than just renting space, but really building a support ecosystem. And so the methodology that I teach my clients is one that is program driven, and it's essentially value driven. So what we want to do is still fulfill the need of people who want to and need to rent workspace, since that's how co-working spaces make money. But we want to do it in a way that attracts people who are going to come there to participate in something that's going to help them grow their business, that's going to help them build relationships, and help them to really feel like they belong to something that's helping them grow as people. And so that kind of program-driven approach, I've found, builds better culture. It does a better job of activating those portions of the market that maybe aren't quite as saturated, and ultimately will lead you to a much more prosperous and easy to manage co-working space in the long run. So, and the reason that I say that I said that it's kind of maybe saturated is because there's so much going into that kind of sweet spot of small businesses and startups that do need office space. And so I think there's still a tremendous amount of opportunity there, but you don't want to just be renting workspace, because it's what so many other people are doing. And there's so many people who say that they're more than a workspace. You'll see every space will talk about how they're more than a workspace and they have community and all this stuff, but so many of them really don't have much more than a workspace rental model. So you don't want to end up in that kind of narrow space where it is getting very crowded. You can offer services in that realm, but you got to offer something a little bit more and a little bit more meaningful and special and compelling. That's where you're going to be able to bring in that wider untapped market. So this is what I teach to my clients. I do this with my one-on-one strategy consulting. I do this with my support network. We have an online support network for people who are starting co-working spaces and already running them. And I've helped hundreds of people all over the world implement these kinds of things successfully. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I've got free resources, I've got paid resources, I've got monthly memberships, I've got all kinds of stuff for you. And it's all available on my website. So head over to New Work Cities. It's nwc.co, and learn more about what I've got to offer. Would love to help you as you think about how to approach building your space so that you can do it right and you can help a lot of people in your city. Bye.